Welcome to the debate. In 2025, Tesla shareholders approved a compensation package that completely shattered the scale of corporate finance. I mean, we're talking about $1 trillion.
Yeah.
So today we are asking, is handing one individual the equivalent of the GDP of a small nation the necessary fuel to colonize Mars and build artificial general intelligence? Or is it a catastrophic misallocation of global resources?
Right. And, it's not just a theoretical question anymore. Looking at the verified data from 2026, we really have to ask if this represents a terrifying concentration of monopolistic power, a power that completely ignores, far more pressing, quantifiable global crises.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, this compensation package is a perfectly calibrated, reality-tethered engine. It's designed specifically to generate the extreme capital required to fund otherwise impossible civilizational advancements.
Okay, I hear the argument for civilizational advancement, but when you look at the advisory warnings leading up to that vote and the opportunity costs we are seeing right now, an entirely different reality emerges. I maintain that it masks a profound failure of societal resource allocation.
Well, to really unpack this, I think we need to strip away the sensationalism and look at the actual mechanics of how this wealth is created. Because if you are listening to this and picturing a giant vault of liquid cash being handed over to Elon Musk, that is fundamentally incorrect.
Right. It's entirely performance-based stock.
Exactly. It's not like handing someone $1 trillion from a vault. It's like telling a baker they can have a massive record-breaking slice of pie, but only if they figure out how to bake a pie the size of the moon first.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, the wealth doesn't exist yet. The package is structured as 12 tranches of stock, and to unlock the full $1 trillion, he has to drive Tesla's market capitalization from its 2025 level of around $1.3 trillion to an astounding $8.5 trillion.
Which is just a staggering number.
It is. Just to contextualize the sheer gravity of that number, $8.5 trillion is more than double the combined value of Meta, Microsoft, and Alphabet at the time the package was approved.
Right. It is a staggering valuation, which is why the financial milestones are paired with incredibly aggressive operational targets.
Precisely. You can't just manipulate the stock price to get there. To unlock the tranches, he has to deliver 20 million vehicles.
Right.
He has to put 1 million robo-taxis into commercial autonomous operation. He has to manufacture and deploy 1 million Optimus humanoid robots.
Yeah.
And on the financial side, he must push the company's core operational profit, its adjusted EBITDA, from the 15 billion range up to 400 billion.
400 billion, wow.
Yeah. And achieving those milestones requires solving massive global inefficiencies in labor and transport. And crucially, I would argue that generating this level of extreme corporate wealth is the only viable way to privately fund his stated ultimate goal, which is a permanent Mars colony, which he estimates will cost up to $10 trillion.
Okay, look, I don't deny the strictness of the performance requirements. No one is arguing that building 1 million humanoid robots is easy.
Right.
But we have to look at the massive institutional warnings that preceded that shareholder vote. Major advisory firms like Institutional Shareholder Services and Glass Lewis, they practically beg shareholders to vote against this.
Well, sure,
And their reasoning wasn't just about the steepness of the climb. It was about equity dilution.
Okay.
Meaning every other investor's slice of the pie gets significantly, irreversibly smaller to feed this one massive payout. We are talking about designing an entire economic ecosystem around a single individual. And when you look at the massive opportunity cost using verified, real-world metrics, the picture gets very grim.
But institutional warnings about equity dilution, I mean, they are purely looking at the math of traditional companies making traditional consumer goods.
Well, they're looking at standard corporate governance.
Right, but we are talking about the actual capital demands of making humanity multiplanetary. That requires a different scale entirely.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered the human scale of the capital being diverted?
What do you mean?
Take the estimates from the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization. Ending global chronic hunger by 2030 would cost between $267 billion and $540 billion.
Okay.
That is roughly 0.3% of global GDP. Eradicating extreme poverty requires about $318 billion annually, according to studies out of UC Berkeley.
Right.
We have clear, quantifiable, and achievable price tags for humanitarian crises. Directing $1 trillion of incentive toward one man's vision of AI and robotics represents a fundamental distortion of our societal priorities.
You're bringing up the FAO numbers for hunger, which are undeniably significant.
They are.
But let's measure that $1 trillion against the vacuum of space. The NASA Ames Research Center estimated that just a first manned mission to Mars, not building a self-sustaining colony, literally just landing a small crew, planting a flag, and coming back, would cost roughly $500 billion.
Which makes Musk's own estimate of $100 billion for a fully functioning, self-sustaining city seem incredibly optimistic.
Well,
if not entirely disconnected from aerospace realities.
it assumes a 1,000-fold improvement in rocket reusability with Starship, which is exactly why the R&D requires immense capital.
I see.
Even if we take the most optimistic math, $1 trillion is functionally required just to get the foundation poured. Think of this compensation package as a civilizational R&D bounty.
A bounty.
Yes, we know we cannot rely on public tax dollars to fund a multi-trillion-dollar interplanetary leap. The political will simply does not exist to tax citizens for a Mars colony while we have the terrestrial problems you just mentioned.
That's certainly true.
Therefore, we necessitate this massive private incentive. If you want a multiplanetary species, you need $1 trillion individual to bankroll it.
I come at it from a different way. The Mars narrative, while romantic and certainly a core part of the original SpaceX ethos, is increasingly functioning as a massive marketing shield.
A marketing shield?
Yeah. It distracts regulators and the public from something far more grounded and monopolistic, which is artificial intelligence.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. I mean, you can't call physical 400-foot-tall steel rockets sitting on launch pads in Boca Chica a marketing shield.
I'm not saying the rockets don't exist. They absolutely do.
Right.
But let's look at the data from early 2026. Look at the SpaceX NASDAQ IPO prospectus. The initial market valuation was set around $2.2 trillion. Now, yes, establishing a Mars colony of 1 million people is explicitly listed as a contractual long-term goal in that prospectus. But if you read the fine print on where the revenue is actually projected to come from, a radically different picture emerges.
Okay.
The prospectus admits that their total addressable market, meaning the maximum potential revenue they could ever hope to capture globally, is $28.5 trillion.
Yep.
And $26.5 trillion of that is actually in artificial intelligence.
Wow.
Not space exploration, not satellite internet, AI. The rockets are the loss leader. The cognitive compute is the endgame.
That is a staggering ratio, I'll admit. So you're saying the entire interplanetary infrastructure of SpaceX is essentially a rounding error compared to the projected value of their AI ambitions?
Exactly. And that completely reframes what this $1 trillion Tesla payout is actually funding.
Interesting.
It shifts us from this noble, Carl Sagan-esque vision of exploring the cosmos for the good of humanity to a very terrestrial, very aggressive supercomputing arms race.
Okay.
This wealth is about monopolizing the future of cognitive infrastructure. Just look at the capital deployment we are seeing right now with xAI. They are burning over $1 billion a month in operational costs.
Yeah.
They recently posted a $13 billion annual loss.
Because the infrastructure requirements for frontier models are not linear, they are exponential.
Right, but look at the physical scale of what that money buys. They spent $18 billion on the Colossus 2 expansion alone, chaining together 555,000 NVIDIA GPUs.
Right.
And then there's the $20 billion macro hard drive server facility in Mississippi.
Yeah, the scale is massive.
The capital intensity is breathtaking. By engineering a corporate system that funnels a potential $1 trillion to one person, you are giving one entity the power to outspend the entire industry's annual data center budget for a decade.
I see.
It is designed to completely crush OpenAI, Google DeepMind, and Anthropic. Not necessarily through better code, but through sheer overwhelming brute force of capital.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. You are framing this supercomputing arms race as a hostile monopolization, but I see it as the required threshold for the next leap in computing capability.
Okay.
Listeners might wonder why 50 million GPUs are necessary in the first place. It comes down to the laws of scaling in artificial intelligence.
But why does one company, controlled by one person, need 50 million GPUs?
Because in AI development, you don't just get linear improvements by incrementally adding more chips. You hit a threshold where the AI suddenly develops emergent capabilities, where it begins to teach itself, effectively achieving artificial general intelligence that can reliably solve complex physics, global logistics, and medical research.
Right, I understand the goal.
But chaining 50 million processors together so they act as a single, cohesive brain requires entirely new physical cooling systems, novel energy grids, and billions in immediate liquid capital.
Sure.
That capital simply does not exist in traditional venture markets. Venture capital cannot fund a single $20 billion facility in Mississippi. Even with XAI's current valuation sitting between 170 and 200 billion, traditional fundraising is too slow and too fragmented.
I mean, I hear you, but
The $1 trillion from the Tesla package acts as the necessary centralized fuel to build the world's largest computational infrastructure. If we want the benefits of AGI, someone has to buy the hardware.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that we have no choice but to accept this model. We need to pause and ask whether society actually wants or needs one individual to buy all that hardware at the expense of everything else.
Okay?
This brings us back to the human scale, to the broader philosophical and economic implications of such resource concentration. We are talking about $20 billion server farms, names with juvenile internet jokes, while we have exact price tags for human suffering.
We are returning to the UN estimates.
We are, because they matter immensely when we talk about global resource allocation. The UN released a combined estimate of $3.5 trillion annually to eradicate extreme poverty and simultaneously control climate change.
Right.
So let's look at the mechanisms of our economy. We are celebrating a corporate governance structure that rewards one individual with enough capital to end chronic global hunger twice over.
Well,
You could wipe out chronic hunger for decades based on the FAO numbers. Instead, we are designing a $1 trillion funnel to fund 1 million robotaxis and massive server farms. I argue that is deeply flawed governance. It is a profound failure of imagination regarding what capital is actually meant to do.
I have to push back aggressively on that framing, because you're committing a fundamental economic fallacy.
How so?
You are comparing uncreated corporate equity to liquid UN budget allocations.
Explain the fallacy, because the numbers are the numbers.
The fallacy is assuming that the $1 trillion is currently sitting in a bank account, and Musk is simply choosing to spend it on NVIDIA chips instead of grain for developing nations.
Right, I know it's not liquid.
But that is not how the mechanics of this package work. Remember the moon pie analogy we established at the beginning? Musk has to create roughly $7 trillion in entirely new wealth for millions of shareholders to even access a single dollar of this package.
Yes, on paper.
He has to take Tesla to an $8.5 trillion valuation. You cannot fund UN food programs with uncreated stock options.
But the end result is the same. The physical resources of the planet, the rare earth metals, the advanced engineering talent, the electricity grid, they are being diverted to hit those specific milestones.
Okay.
You say he is creating wealth, but it's a zero-sum game in the physical world.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because those resources are being utilized to create new efficiencies, not just redistribute existing assets.
Okay.
Think about what it actually takes to hit that 8.5 trillion mark by manufacturing 1 million Optimus humanoid robots. Do you know how intensely difficult that is?
I know it's difficult.
It requires entirely new global supply chains for advanced actuators, spatial sensors, and high-density batteries. It took Tesla decades and billions of dollars to survive production hell just for the Model 3, which is essentially a computer on 4 wheels.
Right.
Scaling bipedal robots that can navigate complex human environments safely is exponentially harder. But if you do it, if you successfully deploy 1 million humanoid robots, you fundamentally solve manual labor shortages in agriculture and manufacturing.
That's a big if.
You drive down the cost of goods and services for everyone globally. That is wealth creation. You fund global prosperity by creating a more efficient global economy, which is exactly what the package incentivizes.
That assumes the wealth trickles down in a way that actually addresses those fundamental inequalities, which historically monopolistic tech concentration has never done.
Wow.
Yes, he is creating $7 trillion in paper wealth for shareholders. But let's talk about the physical infrastructure being built. The power grids entirely consumed by his data centers, the supply chains dominated by his robotics factories. There is only so much electricity to go around.
Yeah, that's fair.
When xAI is drawing gigawatts of power in Memphis and Mississippi just to train an AI model, that is literal physical power not being used to modernize the grid for residential heating, public transit, or hospitals.
You're entirely right that there is only so much electricity on the U.S. grid right now, and xAI is consuming gigawatts of it. I concede that point. The physical constraint is real.
Right.
But my argument is that the infrastructure being built will eventually optimize those public grids. An artificial general intelligence trained on 50 million GPUs could theoretically design lossless transmission lines or solve the remaining bottlenecks in commercial nuclear fusion.
Theoretically. But practically, right now in 2026, it's being used to aggressively box out OpenAI and Google. Look, I don't dispute the engineering marvel of what is being built.
Yeah.
The physical scale of Starship, the computational density of Colossus 2, it is objectively staggering. What humanity is achieving technologically is profound.
Absolutely.
But we have to be completely honest about the concentration of power. $1 trillion gives one person the ability to unilaterally dictate the future of human transportation, the future of labor via Optimus, the future of cognitive architecture via xAI, and the future of space exploration. It effectively privatizes civilizational priorities. When the market caps out at $8.5 trillion, Tesla isn't just an automotive or robotics company. It operates with the leverage of a nation-state.
It is a nation-state built entirely on verifiable performance, though. If he fails to deliver the 1 million robots, if the robo-taxis don't achieve full autonomy, if he fails to deliver the $400 billion in operational profit, he doesn't get the stock tranches.
True, but the attempt itself warps the global market. The sheer gravitational pull of trying to hit those astronomical numbers means every available machine learning engineer, every spare megawatt of power, and every ounce of silicon is pulled into his orbit.
Okay.
And if we look at the verified data from the SpaceX IPO, the orbit is clearly centered on AI supremacy. Mars is the romantic dream that sells the public on the vision. The $26.5 trillion AI market is what actually pays for the operation.
I think we are arriving at a profound realization about the nature of this wealth and what it represents for the future. Let me summarize my position. The $1 trillion compensation package is not a gift.
Right.
It is a highly calibrated, performance-based mechanism designed to force the creation of massive societal wealth through robotics and autonomous transport. And that extreme payout, in turn, acts as the only realistic funding source for the multi-trillion-dollar realities of advanced AI infrastructure and Mars colonization. It serves as the necessary fuel for civilizational leaps that governments simply can no longer provide.
And to summarize my position, while I acknowledge the astonishing scale of the technological achievements required to unlock this wealth, placing this much capital and computational power in the hands of one individual represents a dangerous, unchecked monopoly.
Okay.
The data shows this wealth is primarily accelerating a brute force supercomputing arms race when we have the exact price tag to end global chronic hunger. Engineering a $1 trillion funnel for server farms and speculative tech ambitions is a profound failure of global priorities.
But I think we both acknowledge a very clear point of convergence here today. The sheer scale of this compensation package, coupled with the immense capital intensity of the AI and robotics markets, has fundamentally rewritten the rules of corporate governance. We are no longer dealing with traditional business metrics where a board of directors approves a 5% annual bonus.
Absolutely. The scale has shifted so dramatically that a corporate board is now making resource allocation decisions that directly rival the GDP of the G7. It completely changes what a corporation is capable of.
It does. We started today by talking about how corporate finance usually feels like predictable arithmetic.
Yeah.
But as we've seen, when you introduce a $1 trillion incentive tied to the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence, humanoid robotics, and interplanetary physics, the traditional spreadsheet shatters. You're no longer just balancing a ledger. You are attempting to engineer the physical and cognitive trajectory of the human species.
Exactly.
The lingering question we have to grapple with is that a trajectory we want piloted by a single individual? Thank you for listening.